Hello, thank you for coming out, especially with the hour extra that you're getting. Most appreciated. It's a pleasure to be here, especially for the first year. We do like to engage with festivals when they're starting, especially regional festivals, just so we can kind of give them advice, but also kind of be part of it and kind of see that they're making sure that they're kind of reaching out to filmmakers in the best possible way. Festival Formula, just to give you a little quick background, it's a bespoke consultancy company. We help filmmakers put their work onto the competitive circuit, making sure they're putting it in the best suited places and also not spending too much money, and just to actually get them to be a bit more aware about the strengths and qualities of their film rather than just grabbing the BAFTA and the Academy list, which is what a lot of filmmakers do. So today I've got a very kind of quick fire presentation about what we do, the different types of festivals there are, and also some tips about submission materials. So forgive me if I do speed through quite a lot. We've got a lot to get through. I am going to be hanging around as well for the rest of the day, so I'm not going to run off, don't worry. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what different types of film festivals there are. So generically, I'm going to talk in a kind of very open section in terms of what types of levels of industry, but then also kind of being a little bit more focused. So the first type of festival that anyone will really know is what we call top tier and industry level festivals. They generally are kind of the big red carpet galas. They're after what we call the absolute premieres. They want a world premiere, international, European. They generally come with a higher cost, not all of them, but they are generally kind of further up in a budget. They're very oversubscribed in that lots of people submit to them. They have fewer programming slots, especially for shorts, and they also have kind of very heavy worldwide press attendance. So just to pick a few out, we've got Venice, we've got Rotterdam, BFI London, South by Southwest, Locarno down here in Oshikan. Next level down is what we call audience-led festivals. So they are festivals that, again, generally kind of long-running. Sometimes they're short-specific, which means there's a lot more programming slots open. They're a little bit more affordable, and they also have generally kind of different categories to submit to. For example, music video, student, documentary, thriller, sci-fi, comedy. So rather than just being kind of, we accept shorts or features, it's a little bit more specific. They are sometimes what we call affiliated festivals. So they might be affiliated with BAFTA, BIFA, or British Council, or Movie Maker, or Academy. So just to pick a few out, because some of which you probably will have heard of, like Leeds International, maybe St. Louis, but also kind of Chicago International Children's Festival, London Short Film Festival, which is a little bit cut off at the end. They are generally festivals that you would have attended at some point. They're kind of quite open, they're kind of more for a pure audience, what we say. Then we get a little bit more specific. So we're talking about genre or format or niches. The wonderful thing about the festival circuit is that there is a festival for everything, and I mean everything. There are festivals that want narratives about cycling and bicycles. There are documentary food festivals. There are horror festivals made by female creatives. That's how niche it can get. But to actually think about it in a more generic sense, we've got kind of issue-led festivals, places that want human rights stories. That's an interesting one in that I've been doing this for 14 years, so I've seen lots of different changes. And one of the ones is about how people accept their work, but also how the format has changed. So human rights festivals only ever wanted documentaries, but now they're actually accepting narrative fictions. And that's kind of a reflection of how it's easier to encapsulate a wider audience when you give it to them in an entertainment format. So obviously, if you're not a documentary fan, you're not really going to go to a human rights festival that is pure documentary, whereas if it's narrative fiction, it might open up a wider audience. There are festivals that are wanting experimental documentaries, experimental narratives. There's also student-specific festivals. LGBTQ community is massive on the circuit. Festivals that want dance narratives, and also kind of sci-fi, thriller, horror, and so on. So you can get extremely uber niche. And what we try and get people to think about is what makes their film different from just being a short film or a feature film. Because you have something that's very, very unique and individual. So why is this important? It's important because you're going to try and find your audience that you've made it for. You haven't just made a short film, you've made a short film that is about a particular narrative or an issue, or it's a debut short, or it's made by a female producer or a black or Asian director. These are all elements that can actually help you be a little bit more focused on the festival circuit. It will actually define where you submit your film. So rather than just grabbing, like I say, the BAFTA and the Academy list, which a lot of filmmakers do, you can actually be a little bit more focused on, okay, well, I've got this particular narrative and that particular festival is looking for that. It makes sense to actually kind of submit there. It gives you an increased potential for screenings. And programmers will love you, because programmers get sent an awful lot of submissions. Again, another change since I've been doing this is festivals that used to get 200 submissions now get 2,000 submissions. So if you actually pay a little bit more attention to what they want, what they're after, if they've got a particular theme that year, they will appreciate it, because it means that you've actually consciously considered why you should submit your film there. It will also help you understand the strengths and the weaknesses of your film, which is not a bad thing, actually kind of understanding why your film might not best suit a particular festival. This is slightly easier when you come to genre. So for example, we are seeing a kind of an increase in what we call naturalistic sci-fi or horror, and that's kind of a spin-off of Black Mirror. So it's films that fit that genre, but not in a very strict, pure sense. And you get a lot of horror festivals saying, we want the final girl film, or we want a slasher, we want the blood, guts and gore, we're less interested in the psychological. So it means if you go, well, I've got psychological horror, and they're telling me they're not really after it, you can save that money and focus on the next festival. So things like that can absolutely help you, and it will save you money that you can use elsewhere, which is the biggest thing that we're always telling filmmakers, is talking about money. So the other thing that I do want to talk about briefly is premiere status, because this is something that a lot of filmmakers get in a bit of a tiz about, and it's something that isn't as crucial as it used to be. About 10 years ago, every festival had quite a strict premiere status. Had to be a UK premiere, or London premiere, or European. There's very few festivals now that actually ask for them, apart from the top tier level industry festivals like Venice or Locarno, Berlinale. If there is a premiere status requested by a festival, it generally tends to be by either state or by area. So Tribeca Film Festival, for a live action film, want a New York premiere. So you could have screened in Austin, you could have screened at St. Louis, but as long as you haven't screened in New York, you're fine. St. Louis requires St. Louis premiere. I think Santa Barbara asked for a Santa Barbara premiere. So they do kind of get smaller and smaller. That's because over the years people are churning out content more quickly, but also people are kind of drifting online at the same time. So there's kind of less of a kind of us or them. In the UK, it used to be that, we've had several fluxes, but in the UK, Edinburgh International used to require UK premiere. That's been downgraded since 2 years ago to just needing a Scottish premiere. So it means that you actually there's not a bottleneck, which is what used to happen. BFI London used to have UK premiere, then they downgraded to a London premiere, and now they have no specificity whatsoever. You can be online and screen there too, and we've had that with several clients as well. So all in all, it doesn't really matter. You shouldn't really hold on to your film and kind of pin hopes on a particular world premiere at a festival, because chances are you won't get it, but you'll also miss wonderful opportunities elsewhere. We always use the example, if you were a UK production and you had your world premiere at Cannes, that would be your world premiere, your international premiere, your European premiere, and your French premiere in one screening, which sounds like quite a lot, but you still have your UK premiere, your Irish premiere, Australian, North American, South American, so on. So there's lots to play with. If a festival is asking when you submit what is the current premiere status, it can help them, but it's also to understand how successful your film's been, but also it helps them with marketing. If they can say, well, this is the first screening in America, it's a nice little bit of a coup for them as a festival, but they may not be asking it has to be a US premiere. It's just something that they kind of quite like to know. So I mentioned very briefly about online films. Again, this has changed wildly. It's now more common for a film to be able to be accessible online as well as do the festival circuit. There are still quite a lot of festivals that stipulate in the rules and regulations if your film is online or if it's behind a VOD platform, then we don't want to consider it. And that's kind of up to them. We've seen a lot of festivals flip-flop over the years, those that used to accept stuff online who now don't, and also vice versa. What I would say is that only you are going to know if you're comfortable with a film being online versus it being online and doing the festival circuit. The natural kind of way that people approach this is they'll have a short film, they'll go onto the festival circuit, they'll garner a few very kind of exciting laurels, and then launch online, which kind of helps bring people to it because it's got a little bit of prestige behind it. We've got films that we look after that have existed online, and then we've taken them on the circuit run, and it's still doable. You just have to read more rules and regulations and just check that the festival in question allows it to be online or doesn't. They're generally very upfront about it. And it can vary from festival to festival. So for example, Sundance, your film can be up to 2 years old, it can have no premiere status intact whatsoever, and can be online. But not a lot of people realise that because they don't read the rules and regulations and kind of have this kind of inbuilt prestige that Sundance is this very prolific festival, of which it is, but it's still actually quite flexible with its rules and regulations. So we always say just kind of have a think about what would be the benefits of maybe losing out, potentially submitting to some festivals if you do go online, but at the same time you can kind of stagger it. So we've got a film that we're looking after that we know is going to go online April next year because of the theme, it's a carnival theme. Now when we put together the strategy, it meant that we were very cautious that any festival that happens between, I think we took it on February, March, April time this year, any festival that happens between now and end of March next year is a festival that needs it to be offline. Any festival that we're going to submit it to April onwards doesn't mind it being online. So it's a very conscious thought to kind of consider. So how...
What's that last one? Is it Big Sky or something?
Oh, Big Sky, yeah, the documentary.
Oh, right.
Yes, yeah, the documentary festival, yeah.
Big Sky.
Yeah, it is very good. So how best to prepare for the festival circuit? So bearing all of that in mind, I thought I'd do a very quick roundup. Double check your film is finished. It seems like a very obvious thing to say, but a lot of filmmakers will potentially have a festival that they're aiming for to submit, and they might not have quite finished their film yet. So you can submit a work in progress, so a film that's not completely finished, it might have elements missing from it. The rule of thumb for us, and a lot of festival programmers appreciate this, is sending a picture log. So sending it as the narrative will be at the end of it. What you don't want to do is submit a 10-minute version of your film. A programmer loves it, earmarks it, and when you send in the final version, you send them a 20-minute version because it's going to be a completely different film. So always send out picture locked. You can send out stuff missing grades, sound mix, music, credits. As long as you've incorporated some running time for the credits, that's fine. Again, double check that they do accept work in progress because not everyone does. So again, just read the rules and regulations. Knowing the length of your short film and sticking to it. Now again, I could talk about this for a whole hour by itself, but I don't have that much time, unfortunately. There is no magic running time for a short film. There's no kind of, if I make a 7-minute short film, it's going to get selected for everywhere. It comes down to the strength and quality of your narrative and the execution. We've looked after films that have been 15 seconds, up to films, narrative fiction, to about 35 minutes. And they've had very different circuit journeys because of different budget constraints, different genres, different formats, animation, documentary, narrative fiction, and so on. What we generally tend to advise people is be very conscious of your running time. Rule of thumb is any film can be shorter, even if it's by a second. But it's trying to not be too laborious. To put it into perspective, a festival programme has roughly about 90 minutes to play with for a short film programme. So one sitting that you go and kind of pay to see the screenings. So in that 90 minutes, their role is to select as many strong films as they can to show their audience. So if everyone sent in a half-hour drama, they're not going to have a lot to screen. What it can do is make a festival program and kind of go, well, I've got this amazing 20-minute film, but I've got these like superbly amazing 3 10-minute films, and I can slightly go over if I'm showing more films. So it can be the deciding factor, but at the same time, as long as your film is as long as it needs to be for the narrative, it's okay. So essentially, what I would always say is, even though the Academy ruling is anything 40 minutes and under is a short film, don't go out and make a 40-minute short film. Because it'd be really, really hard for a programmer to actually kind of swallow that in their program and screen it. We have had programmers say to us, look, if you're going to make a 40-minute film, you're halfway to a feature, just make a feature. You know, short is short. It's got to be able to kind of get its narrative across to an audience in a short space of time. Whether that's 2 minutes 30 or if it's 22 minutes, doesn't matter. That's up to you and your narrative. But it's actually being very, very conscious of it. Festivals now are either saying, look, we accept up to 30 minutes, we prefer anything 20 minutes and under. Or they might say, we've got a category for 10 minutes and under and 10 minutes and over. There are more and more festivals that are actually accepting what they call medium to long shorts. So they'll have a separate category, but not every festival. Some of our strongest shorts that have done well on the circuit have been super shorts, kind of 6 minutes and under, because they're easier to program, but they're still going to be very strong narratively. But then again, some of our other shorts that have done well have been 20 minutes, but it's because the story that they're telling is efficiently told and it doesn't feel like it's a 15-minute film trapped in a 20-minute running time. The easiest thing to be very conscious about if you need to maybe trim time is credits. Credits do not need to be very long. It's a short film, it's not a feature film. We had a client who sent me a really, really wonderful film, and it's actually screening here, which is brilliant, which the first version they sent me, they had 4.5 minutes worth of credits. And I was like, that's a short film in its own right. You know, if you can trim that down to even half the running time, you're going to put your film under an overall running time, which is more accessible. And up until that point, they hadn't had many selections. And the film was strong. The film had a really fun, important message, and it had some brilliant performances in it, and it was written wonderfully. So I was like, well, if you just cut that down, it's going to help you. It makes it go from a 23-minute film, which tips it over a 20-minute running time, to being under. A festival programmer will look more lenient on it. And they did. They went away, trimmed it down, we created this strategy, and they've been winning awards left, right and centre and getting more selections. So it is something that, to be very, very conscious of. Again, I'll move on because I could talk about it all day. So looking at the assets that you have in your film and kind of collating them. So the way that we look at it is we call them stories in front of the camera and stories behind the camera, because they can actually kind of help you be a little bit more focused on different parts of the circuit. So it might be a student production, it might be a debut film, it might be a female producer, or it might be a mental health narrative or an LGBTQ narrative. Any of those kind of assets are something that can really help you be a little bit more structured in where you look at on the circuit, but also different categories. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the submission section side of things, because it can actually help you save money as well. Now, this is the easiest thing for any filmmaker to do when they're looking to go onto the circuit, is actually look at film festivals online and browse their previous lineups. Any festival worth their salt will always list their previous programs, and it will just give you a little bit of a sense of what stuff they like. Do they have a particular same theme category that they do every year? A lot of festivals do a Midnight Madness, so that kind of like spooky, horror, bizarre, cult short film screenings at midnight. And just look at if you can see your film sitting in there. Also researching your festivals and understand why you're submitting that. Even if it is because a filmmaker recommended to you, oh, they look after you, they treat you like a king or a queen, and they really do kind of help you, put you in a room with other people, that's a reason to go to a festival. What it shouldn't be is that I'm submitting to the festival because it's free, or because it's cheap, or because it's super expensive. It's got to be a little bit more thought out than that. We've had festivals in the past where people have submitted to them because they're free and maybe haven't really considered what they're after. So there's a brilliant festival called Alekino in Poland, which is children and youth narratives. It's a fantastic festival, and we're going again this year. They are a free submission, and there's a bit of a theme here. If you're a free submission, basically a lot of filmmakers will set all the parameters to free and then just go click crazy and not actually kind of see what they're after. So they're a children and youth festival, and what happened is, because they were free, people just submitted anything they had. So they had wildly inappropriate material submitted to them, which meant they shut the doors early, because they were like, we've gone from having, you know, really perfect or, you know, films for us to consider, to suddenly having a deluge of films that, you know, are completely inappropriate. We have to stop this. Now, of course, they shut the door early, which meant that other filmmakers that maybe would have been best suited when they tried to submit, they can't. So it does have a knock-on effect. Other festivals like Cleveland International introduced 2 new categories in the last 2 years that were both free, one of which was web series and the other one was new media, so installation elements to it. They had filmmakers who were submitting their feature, which should have cost them like $60, submitting it into web series because it was free, which people do silly stuff like that. They had to hire somebody just to get rid of all the incorrect submitted films, which is a big task because that's a very big festival and Academy affiliated as well, so it's got a big spotlight on it. They're never going to watch a film that you've submitted to the incorrect category, especially if you've done it because you want to try and do it for free. It kind of goes against you, but people do things like that, unfortunately. But just understanding why you're submitting there and potentially looking at the different categories can very much help you. So I'm going to briefly talk about money because it's a thing that people often have very little. But at the same time, knowing what your budget is, even if it is small, just know what it is and work to it, because it can help you be more structured, but also actually help you save money and make some very tough decisions, which could give you more to play with later down the line. Just as a rule of thumb, at the moment we're kind of saying for a live action short film, which is the most common made piece of content on the circuit, we recommend that about £600 for a year's worth of submission fees is actually quite healthy. If you came to us with an animation, that would be way too much, because animation festivals are free or cheap, so you get twice as many. Student productions, obviously a little bit cheaper because they're student-focused festivals, but also student discounted categories. So it will vary from film to film. But this is what I was saying about genre earlier, is actually kind of looking to the specifics of your film, because it can help you stretch your budget a lot further, but also save money in other areas. Horror festivals, if there are any horror filmmakers in here, they are generally kind of cheap or free, and also kind of have a free kind of 2-week submission window as well. Being aware of Premier status can help you save money. So I mentioned earlier that there aren't too many in terms of, unless you're looking at outside of the top tier, but for example, Edinburgh International requires a Scottish premiere. I mentioned that earlier. But Glasgow Short Film Festival happens before Edinburgh. So if you submitted and you got selected for Glasgow Short, you obviously wouldn't submit to Edinburgh International because you don't qualify. But if you don't know about the premiere status and you don't read the rules and regulations, you'll waste that £25 and you won't get it back because it's you as human error submitting it. So it's always handy to know things like that because it can help you save money elsewhere. Deadlines. Most festivals now have an early bird deadline, regular, late, extended, super extended, and so on. Rule of thumb, they increase in price. Now, some festivals, like I said, are introducing like a 2-week window where it's free to submit. But what festivals are doing now is opening as soon as they've closed from actually happening. So, you know, Bolton's done it this year, where they happened, 3 weeks ago? And they have now opened for submissions for next year already. So it's something to be aware of. Early bird deadlines, generally cheaper, always good to kind of look out for. The benefit is it's cheaper, but the downside is you have to wait longer because you're kind of waiting to hear back longer from the festival submission when it closes. As well, what I would say is that any festival that that kind of has, they're sometimes spread across different platforms, submission platforms, and some of them will have a different deadline. And it might be because it's submission platform specific, or it might be because it's for a particular category. So you might find, I'm just trying to think of an example, some festivals will say, we'll accept all of our short films on Film Freeway, we're accepting all of our features on Without a Box. So they can kind of straddle themselves. Looking at different categories, I mentioned earlier about debut films or student categories, and they are generally cheaper. Or they can be kind of uber specific, so is this your first time feature, or is it your second or third short, and so on. But also particular categories can come in the form of maybe a production country. So have they got a Spanish focus this year or a Polish focus? If you've got a narrative that fits that, it goes into another category that also could be cheaper. So I'm going to do 2 case studies of films that we look after. So this is a film called 5 Star Foads, which has got Dominic West in, which you can't really see, that's Dominic West. So this film came to us completed, and it is also in existence online. So the other film I've chosen isn't online, so I thought I'd compare and contrast them. It was online to view, but it had no submissions, hadn't been put into any film festivals. So the client came to us and said, I want to see if I can be put into a competitive setting as well, reach a further audience. So they had a budget of £650 for a year. So that's us kind of going, that's their top budget they want to spend. We're going to find festivals that span across a year's worth of the circuit using that budget. So the assets we pulled out is a short film in its own right. It's live action. It is a comedy as well. It's under 10 minutes. And also it's light-hearted, so it has no swearing in it. So it means that it can go to wider territories. So this is just a quick snapshot of the places that it's screened so far. So with this particular film, we don't have a subtitled version of it, so it is kind of peaking quite a lot in Anglo-Saxon territories, so States, Canada, and the UK. And that's just because the client doesn't have a version that's subtitled, so it means that we do have to be very conscious about where we submit it. If a festival is going to say, if we select you, we need a Spanish subtitle version, or French, and so on. So we found with that budget 36 festivals that would accept a film that's online, that likes their comedy, that didn't need a subtitle version, and that we think it would best suit using that budget. So it actually finishes this year, the strategy we've created. And so far they've had 10 screenings and 1 request. By request, we mean a festival or a programmer has seen or heard about it elsewhere, gets in touch with us and says, we'd love to consider it, could we have a screener link to view the film? So not a guaranteed screening, but it's something that can save you money because they're actually reaching out themselves. So it's played at a variety of what we would call audience-led festivals. We've just come back from seeing it at Kerry Film Festival. It's also coming up at Norwich Film Festival and Aesthetica in the UK. And also there's a comedy-specific festival in Romania, Comedy Cluj. So obviously that fitted the remit perfectly. In complete contrast, we have a film called 2 Puddles. It's quite dark, but it's a brilliant film. So this came to us completed, and it had no submissions, and it's also not online at all. He had a little bit more for budget, £700 for a year. So his is a super short. It's 6 minutes on the button, no more, no less. It's a dark comedy genre. It straddles bizarre, alternative, horror, supernatural, and alternative. It has very limited dialogue. So limited to the point where we've said to festivals, it doesn't need to be subtitled. You don't need to hear what they're saying. It's generally kind of exclamations and kind of names. And it's a live action. Now I said earlier about horror and supernatural festivals being cheaper and free. So with that in mind, this is actually kind of played in a variety of places. It's got kind of pockets in the States and in Canada because there's lots of lots of horror festivals situated there. But also it's played a lot in Europe because, again, that lack of dialogue that needs to be subtitled, and it's super short. So that strategy. We have found 68 festivals that we wanted to submit the film to. It's been running from March this year, runs through till June next year, and we've had so far, and already this is out of date because it just keeps picking up selections. It's had 15 selections that I've detailed here, and it had 11 requests so far. So I mentioned earlier the horror and the kind of sci-fi community talk to each other. They often programme for more than one festival. They'll attend each other's festivals as well. So this had a world premiere at Palm Springs. Off the back of that, it had 4 festivals actually get in touch and say, we've just seen the programme grow live. This looks amazing. Can we have a look at the film? It's played at a variety of kind of horror-specific festivals. So Grossman Fantastic, Popcorn Frights in Florida, Motel X in Portugal, and Ramaskrik in Norway. This is an interesting festival because it's horror specific and is actually kind of held in the area that original Troll Hunter was filmed, which takes place in a woodland there. Now, Two Puddles happens in a wood, and this festival, it takes place in the wood, so they've obviously seen a synergy there and requested the film. But also at some other festivals that kind of have affiliation attached to them. So again, Palm Springs, Edmonton is Academy affiliated in Canada, Encounters, and Calgary as well. So it's played a variety, not just horror and not just traditional audience-led festivals. It's straddled both because it can. It's a very super short, very easily programmable film. So I'm going to talk about the submission materials that are good to kind of prep for when you go onto the circuit. So the actual act of submitting is quite time consuming in terms of reading the rules and regulations, figuring out deadlines, seeing if your film is eligible. But these are some platforms that are very popular and can actually help you in terms of doing the act of submitting itself. So if anyone here has used the submission platform, you put all your film information into it. You only have to do that once, and then it's a case of shopping around for the festival that you want to submit to. So the most popular ones you would have heard of would be Film Freeway, a Canadian-based submission platform, and Without a Box, which last week announced that they're closing as of October next year. Yay! Fest Home is also becoming more and more popular. A short film depot was created by Clermont-Ferrand Short Film Festival, so it's the only place you can submit there. Not an easily navigational, fantastic website to look at, but there are some amazing festivals on there. If anyone has a film that is either co-production with France or has French subtitles or no language at all, as in no dialogue, look at Film Fest platform. It is just French film festivals. So that's something to bear in mind. Some festivals just want a screener link sent to them by email.
Sorry, I've got to go in a few minutes because I've got something. If I could just ask one question.
Yeah, that's fine.
How many festivals are you actually involved in? And then do you just do film festivals or do you do stage as well?
No, so we don't do stage, just film. In terms of film festivals, we have lots of relationships across the circuit, from very top tier down to kind of small niche genre festivals. It's hard to say how many because it's bespoke to every film that we create. So, short answer is a lot. I wouldn't be able to tell you a specific number.
Do you recommend any coming up that you would say, oh, this is worth going to because it's so specific, isn't it?
Yeah, I can recommend festivals to go to. Like, always go to Aesthetica because they screen.
I've never heard of it.
It's in York, so it's BAFTA affiliated, and they screen 300 films a year, like in the week that they run. And they also hold some amazing industry sections, including We Talk there every year. But yeah, there are always festivals happening. Always attend as many as you can. But yeah, in terms of festivals we recommend to submit to, it's always bespoke to the film because it might be a genre film or
Is there
project.
actually an equivalent of this for stage?
I don't know. Sorry, in short, yeah. No, I'm not sure. I think stage is slightly different because obviously it's dependent on the size of your budget for maybe touring. I'm from a theatre background, but as a writer, so yeah. So I know it's hard. It's probably like harder than the film circuit, but yeah.
That you'll be around during the day.
Oh yeah, and at the award ceremony tonight.
Okay, thanks.
No, definitely. That's all right. Thank you. So some festivals will just literally want you to send a Vimeo link or a screener link by email, and some, crazily enough, still want a DVD in the post. So there's a Canadian art house festival that wants a DVD in the post, which is always tedious every year because you have to spend about £5 getting it over there just to be considered. So the actual submission materials that you'll need. So we've kind of put together some very basic information that you will always get asked for, which will help with your eligibility for festivals. So for example, the production country. So again, it can help you qualify for particular categories. For example, British Shorts that happens in Berlin, they want UK productions, that is their remit. This is England and Rouen, France, again, just want British productions. But a lot of Latin American festivals just want Latin American productions or by Latin American directors. Duration, I mentioned earlier, it can kind of put you into a different category, but that is something that a festival will ask for, and it's the duration of your entire film, including the credits, not just the actual action of the film. So if your film runs for 23 minutes, it's not a 20-minute film, it's a 23-minute film. Technical info can cover aspect ratio, frame rate, what you shot on, and any exhibition versions that you have. Nationality of the director and a date of birth can again qualify you for particular categories. For example, there are festivals that want content from people under 30 or over 30. There's the Women Over 50 Film Festival that happens in London. Again, it's narratives or the director has to be a female over 50. Talk about, what I was saying earlier, there's very niche festivals, they do exist. Production date, most festivals, unless they are very top tier, are asking stuff made within 2 years of the actual kind of festival happening, or within a year. So you'll often see a festival say, we want anything that's been made after the 1st of January 2017. So of course when you're looking forward to the next year, that will roll on 1 year. Budget, it's not something that's made public, but essentially some festivals will have a category saying, we want films made under £500, or we want films that are made over £3,000. Or you have a festival like Independent Film Days in Berlin, where they say our whole remit is a film cannot have cost more than X amount euros to be suitable for our festival. So again, there's lots of different focuses. Logline. So we recommend a logline should be no longer than 25 words. We always kind of recommend think about it like a tweet. Some of the time, a festival won't have a lot of space to put about a synopsis or a logline in their programme. Sometimes a festival can have like a lanyard where it's literally kind of no bigger than this, kind of possibly a little bit bigger, and it is a very, very brief line. As an example, we've got 2 at the top, which are from 2 of our clients, and 2 underneath that we've kind of grabbed from IMDb from the general public, which are not very good at all, and they kind of run a little longer. So as you can see, the top one is from a brilliant film called Litterbugs, which is playing at the festival. It's 23 words, and it tells you pretty much all you need to know about the film, tone, what happens, and the kind of story that you're going to get. Underneath of 25 words, we've got La Madre Buena, which you may have seen the image. That is a film that we looked after it went online. It features a Donald Trump pinata in it, and it went online before he was president, so it was kind of a big boost to the film. And it is fantastic. But again, these ones underneath, they either don't say a lot in terms of what the film's about, but also just very wordy, and they just don't make any sense. This one here is 54 word, 1 sentence. And it's actually for The Godfather. And when you read that, you just kind of go, really? Okay. So the synopsis, we recommend no more than 40 words. We also recommend, if your logline is strong enough, add in a few of those kind of personal elements like a name or a year or the kind of area that the film happens, and then make that your synopsis as well. Most festivals are always asking for shorter the better. So as an example, we've got at the very top, this is one of our clients that had their world premiere at Venice last year, a short documentary, 36 words, and it tells you everything you need to know, what it's about, what it is, and what to expect. This one here, 138 words, and is like pretty much most of Star Wars, that you don't need to kind of watch the rest of the film. We try and recommend to filmmakers, don't give everything away. Give them a flavour of what they're going to see. This, whether it's your synopsis or your logline, it's going to go in a festival programme, and you want people to be intrigued by it and actually kind of sell it for you. What you don't want to do is give everything away or be so vague it doesn't make sense. So now we're going to talk about stills, which again is something very, very important. A lot of festivals will ask for several, and depending what platform you go onto, you generally are dictated. Like Short Film Depot asks for 1, Film Freeway you can have 9, Without a Box you can have 9, First Home I think you can have 3, but they are essentially your kind of salesperson for your film. They are, again, along with your logline or your synopsis, telling people this is something I'm interested in looking at, it's something I want to go see. Again, it's not fantastically great, you can't see too much of them, but we always recommend trying not to pick something that's a nighttime shot or too much of a wide shot, because sometimes they get shrunk down to very, very small sizes in the programme. And if it's a dark nighttime shot, or if it's something that's a wide angle, it doesn't translate very well as soon as you shrink it down. So something that's either bold, colourful, intriguing, or something that's just something different to look at, it can actually kind of help capture people's attention. So just to kind of pick out a few, this is an animated music video, so it's a mixed media as well. And this is from 5 Star Forward again, that I did a comparison on. This is The Number, which is a South African short documentary. It is in black and white, so again, it's got a nice contrast, because sometimes a programme will be printed in black and white. That's something to consider as well. But also it's still quite a light shot that you can still see. Again, this is the La Madre Buena that I mentioned earlier. It is online, please go check it out, because if you need any more excuses to laugh at that man, that's a good one.
What's it called?
La Madre Buena, but if you typed in The Good Mother, it should come up. In fact, if you go onto our website, if we go on our website.
Well, I think it's just a trailer.
Yeah, I think it might just be the trailer. But yeah, if you type in The Good Mother, it should come up. So bios, again, should be something that is short and sweet, and it needs to be about you as a filmmaker, not anything else. No one needs to know anything about what you did when you were a kid, what you'd like to do when you retire. It's about your accolades that you have as a filmmaker. This one at the bottom is always a good one that we like to point out, because what she's done is she's actually added a website at the end. So it means that there's somewhere that people can go if they want to find out more. You're not kind of cluttering up everything and trying to cut a very kind of long bio into something very, very short. So headshots. This is something you will get asked for by festivals, mostly of the director and the producer. Again, clues in the title, headshot, it's got to be of your head, and it's got to be something clear. It's got to be something that people will be able to recognise you. It sometimes goes on your lanyard, or it goes into a programme. So obviously if you want people to come up to you and talk to you about your film, then you want to be able to say, this is what I look like. We do get a lot of arty shots of people kind of in profile, in the shadows, kind of staring at a playback monitor. That's nice, but it doesn't actually show your face. And it needs to be something that's clear for people to be able to see. Dialogue list, so I mentioned earlier about subtitles, is something that is always handy to have in your back pocket, because it can help you. So essentially, dialogue list is the timecode in and the timecode out, the character that's speaking and the line of dialogue in its original native language. The reason being, if you submitted to, say, a French film festival and they said, we'd like a subtitled version of your film, and you say, well, I don't actually have a subtitled version of my film in French, but I've got a time-coded dialogue list. They will go, brilliant, hand it to us, we'll do the translation and we'll create your subtitle file for you. It's easier doing this at the beginning than doing it last thing when a festival goes, we need a time-coded dialogue list by the end of tomorrow. It's a pain in the arse to do, depending how wordy your film is, but for a lot of hard work at the beginning, it can pay off tenfold later down the line. Generally, those festivals that create you your subtitled version will either give you the film file back with the subtitles burnt in, or your SRT file, your subtitle file, which means that you then have a professionally translated version of your film that you can use for other festivals as well. Exhibition copies. We always recommend that people be very conscious about what they may need in the future, but don't spend out at the beginning. For example, you can do quite a lot with having an MP4 version of your film in a ProRes. That's generally what most festivals will be asking for screening. It's dependent on the venues that they're using. Sometimes it might be a screen like this, in which case they can get away with an MP4. If they're screening in a cinema surrounding but aren't using DCP, digital cinema package, you can get away with a ProRes because it can stretch to quite a large size without losing any of the quality. We get a lot of festivals, mostly in America, asking for Blu-ray backups. They still ask for them now. It is something that's really annoying to kind of create because they're quite expensive, but also you don't see them again generally. They keep them as a backup. To create a Blu-ray, you'll need a ProRes and the corresponding WAV files. The majority of festivals are screening digital now. DCP, again, is something that is very, very common. Not every festival will screen them because not every venue is a cinema that has a DCP facility within it, but you can create a DCP from a ProRes, so that's why we always recommend having these two files for when you are going out to the circuit. Never create a DCP at the beginning because you may never need it for two reasons. You may never screen at a festival that requests a DCP, or you might not get selections at all. So it's a very kind of costly outlay for something that you don't generally will need all the time. What we always recommend is know that you've got the either the contact and a budget to create one, but just never create one until you actually need one. The other reason being is that there are a lot of festivals out there who will offer to create one for you at a very discounted rate. We had Underwire recently in the UK, London, that said we will screen a DCP if you have one, but if you don't have one, we will create one for you for the screening. If you would like to keep it, it's £50. So it means that if you didn't want to buy it, you'd still be able to screen because they're creating one for the film to screen in the festival, but for £50 you've got to have a download link, which you can use again and again. So it's always handy to kind of keep that in mind. You will have to kind of be aware that some festivals will only screen in a particular frame rate, which means you'll have to kind of convert your film, or they will have to convert your film, and it does change the length of your film as well. Aspect ratios are another thing as well. It's something that a festival, the submission platforms will also ask what your aspect ratio is. It's so the festival knows how you have shot your film and how you want it to look. But also it will be something you may have to sacrifice depending on how they screen the films. Sound, is your film in stereo or 5.1? They're the most common ones. Not everywhere can screen a 5.1, so it's always good to have a stereo version. We had a client come to us recently saying that they're wanting to make their next film in 7.1, which is really specific, and there'll be very few festivals that can accommodate for that, so we've had to say to them, actually make a 5.1 version as well as a stereo. KDM encryption with DCPs, don't bother with them at all. So for anyone who doesn't understand KDM keys, when you go see the latest film at the cinema, the Odeon, they'll have a DCP and they'll have a KDM key, and it's basically to stop anyone screening it outside of when it should be screened. So a KDM key is something a projectionist will have to enter into the machine to say, I want the new Avengers film to screen in this particular location in this screen at 12:40, and that's the key that they put in, so therefore it does screen. You don't need that for short films on the circuit, and also we are getting a lot of requests for features to not have them either. They are expensive because you have to generate them each time and pay for them. But also, you know, things can change. Festivals never run to time. That's the one thing that we've gathered over the years. So of course it means that you have a very small window. So don't bother about KDMs. In terms of also it links on to delivery, a lot of festivals now for short film will accept a download link of your DCP, especially because short films generally tend to be a smaller, large file. If features can sometimes be like 178 gigabytes and so on, that's an insane amount. So therefore, they've generally asked for it on a crew drive. But the majority of places ask for a download link or a USB or a hard disk drive. Crew drive is not really kind of needed for a short film. That's when you actually get it as the kind of, you know, big hard drive that you put inside of a DCP machine in cinema. And the other thing is test your DCP. We've seen kind of filmmakers, not our clients, but other people at festivals where they've tested their DCP on a laptop with headphones, and therefore when they've seen it in a big cinema surrounding, the sound is all over the place. And it can actually be very, very humiliating. So double check that you have got your DCP checked. Some festivals are amenable that if you send it to them early enough, they'll check and they'll come back to you. So we did have it with a client who created their own DCP. We sent it far enough in advance that the festival came back and said, actually, your film's really yellow. And that meant that he could go, okay, I know what the problem is. He could go back and fix it and then send a new version. So just a few examples of places that we've had to deal with recently and what they're after. So we have fantastic Lund Festival in Sweden. They wanted a DCP on a USB, so they wanted it sent to them physically in the post. They didn't want a backup. Underwire, like I mentioned earlier, they wanted a download link for your DCP. They also wanted a ProRes as a backup sent to them as a download. So it meant if they had any issues with your DCP, they had a backup, they could still screen the film. Bucheon in South Korea, they wanted a ProRes on a USB in the post. So again, quite expensive to send. But they didn't want a backup. And in Flickerfest in Australia, they wanted a ProRes download link. So great, doesn't cost anything. But they also wanted a Blu-ray backup sent in the post. So it costs you a little bit more money. Every festival will be different. Whenever they send through your acceptance, they'll detail how they want it, when they want it, and if they need it in a particular way. So it's always good to kind of double check what they're after. Not to end on too dour of a note, but I want to talk very briefly about rejection. The festival circuit is pretty much built on rejection. As a filmmaker, you're going to get turned down for funding, for the actor that you want, you're going to get the script notes that you don't like, you're going to get turned down from bursary screenings and programs. This is kind of rejection exacerbated and you're opting in for it. The festival circuit now is competitive as it ever has been. It's the fiercest I've ever known it. Festivals can only accommodate so much in that we've seen festivals increase by a day to be able to screen more films, but of course they're still getting an awful amount of films sent to them at the beginning. I do not envy a programmer's job because it is really, really hard. As well as that, they don't have the time or the people power to be able to tell you why your film didn't get selected, and that's the hardest thing. Is you will get an email saying, thank you for submitting, it was our bumper year this year, we received 3,000 submissions, all the films were brilliant but you've not been selected, please submit next year. And you'll get that an awful lot. There are some festivals out there that will give you feedback if you would like it, very few and far between, but at the same time it can actually be counterintuitive because a festival may come back and say, we loved your film, and you'll say, but why didn't you select it? And they'll just say like, well, we didn't have time for it, we didn't have space. So the one thing I would say is that, I mentioned earlier, don't pin your hopes on a particular festival because chances are that you probably won't get selected, and that's not because of your film being terrible or your film not being best suited, but it could just be that you are literally pipped to the post by something else that either said the same thing in a more pithier way or a better execution or anything like that. But actually just kind of try and just suck it up and just go onto the circuit. The main thing is you've made a film. You don't need a film festival to tell you you're a filmmaker. This is just an extra bonus that you get to widen your reach for your audience. And just kind of not take it too personally. And definitely don't kind of email festivals saying, you should have picked my film, why have you not picked my film? They remember stuff like that. And also they sometimes will love your film, and sometimes it's hard. It's a very hard decision for a programmer to actually say, I love this film, but actually it doesn't suit the program that we've got space for. We find it a lot with programmers. You know, we spoke to Maeve McGrath, who's a festival director of Kerry, and they hadn't secured the program when we spoke to her, and she had to kill 50 films, and she loved all of them. And she did include an extra venue to kind of screen some more, but again, you can't screen 50 more films. It's got to be considered. So it is a hard gig, but also, you know, you've made your film. The best thing is to be savvy about your budget, know where you're submitting, be a little bit more structured about where you can stretch your budget, and also just try and enjoy it when you do get those selections and you do get those engagements from festivals, because they can pay you back tenfold and you'll have an amazing time. And I realise I have whizzed through that, and I may not have any time left for questions because it's literally like 1 minute to 12, but I am sticking around. So yes.
Can I just ask a really quick
Yeah,
one?
of course you can, please.
Is there anywhere that you can find a database of just the simple dates of all the festivals, like dates of them or submissions?
No.
I knew there wasn't. I tried to create one myself like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And
So
there's just so many.
Yeah. So basically, it's the same as submission platforms. You'll never find one submission platform that has a comprehensive list, because, like I said earlier, there's so many niche festivals. You could pick any area in France and it has about 20 or 30 submissions to submit to festivals, but they wouldn't be on your radar because they're only for French filmmakers. So there's never like a submission platform anywhere or list.
Yeah.
It's best, we always recommend, use the submission platforms to research festivals.
Yeah.
But the main thing should be you find a festival you want to submit to, and then find out how they select, like how they submit to them. Because if you go to one platform, you end up just getting tunnel vision. Like everyone used to say to us, you know, oh, I've looked through all of Without a Box. You'll be like, but Venice and South by Southwest and Locarno and Berlinale aren't listed on there because they use their own platform. So it's not comprehensive. But yeah, unfortunately, no.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was the case.
Yeah.
Have a look at the Movie Maker Top 50 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Look at the Movie Maker Top 50. So
Yeah.
they're a collection of film festivals from around the world, and they have they're on various platforms, maybe on their own website, but they are highly rated, highly reviewed festivals in one area for you. It's only 50, but at least it gives you like a breakdown of the main ones.
And that changes each year. So this is Ian, our submissions coordinator. So
Cool, yeah.
ask him questions as well.
Wicked. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you. Yeah.
If you can't make it to one of the more further afield festivals, is it still worth submitting to?
Absolutely. You should never.
And you're going to be hanging around for the rest
Yeah.
of today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know where?
Limit where you submit your film based on if you can attend or not, because any festival that is decent will not penalise you for that. We've got clients who, you know, have their world premieres the other side of the world, but then if you had all the time and the money in the world, you wouldn't be able to attend everything just because of, you know, you're only human. We have clients who will say, look, I can't attend, but can I send one of my cast members because they're closer? And they like that. Basically, any festival love it when a filmmaker turns up, because they can say to them, we loved your film, and, you know, do a Q&A perhaps. But then at the same time, like, it's not imperative. I think it's dependent. I would say, you know, if you were getting if you were screening in a very prolific industry festival, then I would say that you should really consider going. We had that with Tim Keeling for Two Puddles when he had his world premiere at Palm Springs, and he was like, oh, I'm not sure if I should go or not. And we were like, no, you need to go, because that's a big festival for you as a filmmaker. There is support for different festivals. So there's the British Council Travel Fund. It's a very short list. It's probably about 25, 30 festivals on there, mostly European, with a few bigger American ones like Tribeca and South by Southwest and Sundance. As soon as you've been selected for one of those festivals, then you can apply to them for funding to get you to the festival. And we've not had anyone that's been turned down, because they're supporting British export. At the same time, there are festivals out there that will say, we'll pay for your plane ticket and we'll pay for your accommodation. You'll have to pay for your own food. but but it varies. Well, I can safely say to you that with the bigger festivals, it's dependent on the type of premiere that you're having sometimes, or the competition that you've been put in. So we had a client who had her world premiere at Indie Shorts, and she's Australian. So they flew her from Australia to Indianapolis because it was her world premiere. She was in a particular competitive category, and it meant that if she won that category, she would be automatically qualifiable for the Oscars. So that goes in their favour for having a filmmaker there in case they win. But then at the same breath, we had a client who, was it this week? For SCAD Savannah, which has no affiliation at all. It's a fantastic festival, one of the top 50, I think, for Movie Maker. It wasn't his world premiere, it wasn't even his US premiere, but he was in a professional category where it's competitive. And they've paid for his flight and his travel, and he couldn't go because he's a working director and editor, and he was working on a very big project. So he could go and then couldn't, but they didn't penalise him. It's unfortunate that they've paid for everything, but they were like, we need the director, no one else. So it's dependent on the festival, but you shouldn't stop yourself from submitting because you can't go, because otherwise you could miss an opportunity of being selected. And we've got other filmmakers that are like, I can't attend, but can I do a Skype interview, or can I do a pre-recorded video message? And that happens a lot more now. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're going to be hanging around for the rest of today?
Yeah, absolutely.